My parents chuckled like it was a joke. "You'll never be as good as your sister." That line landed heavier than anything they'd ever said to me. I looked at my dad across the table. My mom's fork scraped her plate, like the sound was supposed to cover the silence. But I wasn't laughing. I stood up. My voice didn't shake. "Then tell him to pay all the bills. I'm not sending money anymore." The room froze. My dad blinked, leaned back in his chair, and his tone dropped flat. "What money? We never received a single dollar from you. For years I'd been wiring rent, paying utilities, sliding cash into envelopes they never asked for. I never bragged. I just did it because I thought that's what family was. Quiet help. The kind that kept the lights on and the heat running through winters." Now he sat there, acting like I'd made it up. Like I was the liar. I looked at my sister. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her nails tapped against her phone screen like she was somewhere else. She was always the golden one, the one with the stories told about her at family dinners, the framed photos on the walls. Me. I was just the guy who got called when the water heater broke. The guy who paid before anyone else even knew the bill had come. And in that moment, standing in that kitchen, I realized something. All those transfers, all those nights working double shifts just to cover their mortgage, none of it mattered. Not to them. Dad's voice echoed again. "We never received a single dollar." The lie was too sharp to ignore. I walked out of the room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just left. Because suddenly I wasn't sure which betrayal was worse, that they dismissed me with a laugh, or that they erased everything I'd done like it never existed. The night air outside felt heavier than usual, pressing against me like a truth I'd been avoiding. And I kept asking myself one question. Have you ever given everything in silence, only to realize no one ever noticed? I didn't sleep that night. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the creaks in the old floorboards. I sat on the couch, staring at the stack of receipts in my backpack, proof of every payment I'd made. Rent checks, utility transfers, even the $3,200 furnace repair I'd covered last winter. I had kept them all. Not to wave around, but to remind myself when things got tight that I wasn't crazy, that my money was going somewhere. Now my dad's words replayed on a loop. "We never received a single dollar from you." It wasn't just denial. It was erasure. By morning, I knew I couldn't carry it alone. I drove to the bank downtown, the one with the green awning and the same teller who always asked me about my overtime lifestyle. I asked for a record of every transfer I'd made to my parents' account for the past 5 years. The teller looked at me like she knew something was off. "You sure you want the full printout?" "It's a lot." "Yes," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. When the stack of papers slid across the counter, it hit me like a weight. Page after page of my own name, my own account, sending money to theirs. Tens of thousands of dollars. On the drive back, I didn't go home. I went to my sister's place. A condo downtown, new floors, shiny appliances, the kind of place you only get when life opens doors for you. She opened the door with that same look she always gave me, half polite, half impatient. "What are you doing here?" I held up the papers. "You know I've been paying their bills. Don't act like you don't." She sighed, leaned against the frame. "They didn't tell you? They moved the account. Dad didn't want money going to the mortgage anymore. They redirected it." "Redirected where?" I asked. Her eyes flickered. "To me. They said it was fair since I'm planning the family's future. I mean, you were just helping, right?" The pages crumpled in my fist. 5 years of sacrifice, funneled to someone who never even asked me thank you. I looked at her, at the life she lived while I broke my back to fund it. And I thought, how do you confront someone who pretends theft is family duty? I drove until the streets thinned out and the fields stretched wide. Sometimes the only way to think straight is with empty roads in front of you. The papers sat on the passenger seat, pages rattling with every bump. Every dollar I'd wired had gone into her account. My sister wasn't just the favorite, she was the chosen one. My money had been the quiet engine behind her life. I stopped at a gas station outside town. The kind with flickering lights and coffee that tastes like burnt cardboard. I sat there with the printouts spread across the hood of my car. That's when I saw it. Buried in the lines of numbers was a transfer I didn't recognize. $5,000. Labeled as family emergency. I remembered that night, Dad had called in a panic about the roof leaking. I'd sent the money instantly. But the transfer didn't go to the mortgage company. It went straight to an account under her name. I folded the page, shoved it in my jacket, and drove back into town. By the time I reached my parents' house, dusk was settling. The porch light was already on, buzzing with moths. I didn't knock, I walked in. Dad was in his recliner watching the game. Mom sat at the table with her knitting. Neither looked surprised to see me. I laid the stack of bank records on the table. Explain this. Dad didn't glance down. Son, you don't understand how things work. We've always managed the money in ways you don't need to worry about. Mom chimed in, gentle but sharp. Your sister is responsible. She's building something. You're just surviving. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. Surviving? I've been paying for this house to stay standing. For years. Dad muted the TV finally, turned to me with a calm that cut deeper than anger. We never asked you to. You chose to send money. That doesn't make it ours to explain. There it was. My entire contribution reduced to a voluntary mistake. I looked at them, then at the walls of this house I'd unknowingly been renting for someone else's future. And I asked myself, what do you do when the people you love rewrite the truth while staring you in the eye? I left their house without another word. The papers stayed on the table like a stack of unwanted mail. Driving home, I felt hollow, like I'd been stripped down to the bone. But later that night, while staring at the ceiling of my apartment, I realized something. I had the one thing they couldn't erase. Proof. The bank statements, the wire receipts, the signatures, it was all there. They could deny my voice but not the numbers. The next morning, I stopped by the diner where I sometimes worked weekends. My buddy Nate slid me a coffee across the counter. Rough night? He asked. I told him everything, how the money meant for bills had been funneled into my sister's life, how my parents acted like I was delusional. He leaned back, let out a low whistle. Man, you've been bankrolling their golden child. You ever think about showing people what's really been happening? His words stuck. Not revenge. Just exposure. That night, I sat at my desk and started scanning everything. Page after page into digital files. I typed out dates, amounts, explanations. A timeline of betrayal. I didn't dress it up, I kept it plain, factual. When I was done, I had a document thick as a novel. I sent a copy to myself, another to my work email, another to a flash drive I tucked into my glove box. Redundancy. They couldn't erase it this time. A week later the chance came. A family gathering at my aunt's place. Everyone was there, cousins, uncles, even neighbors who'd known us since we were kids. I sat quiet through the potluck dinner, listening to stories about how brilliant my sister was, how selfless my parents had been. And then, when the room settled into coffee and dessert, I cleared my throat. I have something to share. Eyes turned. My sister frowned, already suspicious. My dad stiffened. I pulled out the flash drive and handed it to my uncle, the only one in the family who'd ever been fair with me. Play this on the TV. The room filled with silence as lines of bank transfers, bills, and receipts rolled across the screen. My name. My account. My money. Their accounts. Their denials. No yelling. No accusations. Just the numbers. And I watched faces shift, from disbelief to shock to quiet shame. In that moment I wondered, is truth enough to change the story they've built, or will they twist this too? The room was so quiet I could hear the old ceiling fan clicking above us. Each slide on the TV hit like a hammer. Dates, amounts, transfers. My uncle paused on the $5,000 transfer labeled family emergency. He looked straight at my dad. That's his money right there? My dad shifted in his chair. His voice came out even, but the tremor underneath gave him away. We never forced him. He sent it on his own. Mom added softly, it was generosity, not obligation. But no one was buying it. Not after watching page after page prove I'd been the invisible backbone of their comfort. My sister finally spoke. You don't understand. They gave it to me for planning. I'm building something for the family. Building? My aunt shot back. On his back. The cousins whispered. My uncle shook his head. That's not planning, that's exploitation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for me. I stood ready to leave, but my uncle stopped me. Don't go yet. Let them answer this in front of all of us. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom's knitting needles sat abandoned in her lap. My sister crossed her arms like she was the victim here. I let the silence hang before I said, I worked double shifts, slept in my car some nights, skipped vacations just to keep money flowing into that account. And you erased it with one sentence. We never received a single dollar from you. No one replied. When I finally walked out of that living room, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. The truth was out, yes. But their faces told me they'd never admit it, not fully. In the days that followed, the call started. My mom left voicemails, her tone wavering between guilt and justification. My dad stayed silent. My sister sent one text, you've ruined everything. But I wasn't done yet. Quiet exposure at a family gathering wasn't enough. Because if the truth only lives in one room, it's easy to bury again. And I thought, what happens when you make the truth undeniable even outside the family walls? I started small. I printed copies of the transfer records and left them in a manila envelope on my boss's desk. He'd always joked about how family comes first. I wanted him to see what mine thought that meant. Then I mailed another envelope to my aunt, the one who handled church finances. If anyone knew how to spot misuse, it was her. It wasn't revenge, it was documentation. Proof I wasn't the lazy son, the background character. Proof that I had carried weight no one else had seen. Days turned into weeks and the ripple began. My uncle called, his voice low. You did right showing this. People deserve to know. At the diner, even Nate raised an eyebrow when he saw me. Heard your folks are in a bit of a spotlight lately. Guess truth travels. The real shift came at the next town fundraiser. My dad had always been the man at the front, shaking hands, giving speeches about family values. That night, though, whispers filled the hall before he even spoke. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall, watching him stumble through a welcome. My sister was there too, her perfect image cracking. People glanced at her condo keys on the table, at the car parked outside that everyone suddenly knew hadn't come from her hard work. No one shouted. No one confronted them outright. But the silence around them was louder than any accusation. Mom caught my eye across the room. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not angry, just worn down. For the first time, maybe she realized denial couldn't shield her. That night, I drove home without speaking to any of them. The streetlights blurred past and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, relief. Because the weight wasn't mine anymore. The truth didn't sit in my backpack or in hidden files. It was out there, alive in other people's minds. Still, one question gnawed at me as I parked in front of my apartment. If the truth finally stands on its own, what do you do with the space betrayal leaves behind? I didn't hear from my parents for nearly a month. The silence itself felt like an answer. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to acknowledge what they'd done. But the town had shifted. At the grocery store, people who once asked about my sister's promotions now asked how I was holding up. At the diner, someone left an envelope on my booth seat. Inside was $200 and a note, for the bills you covered. Thank you. It wasn't about the money. It was the first time anyone recognized the weight I had carried. Meanwhile, my sister's shine dimmed. The stories about her plans for the future dried up. When people asked her about the condo or the car, she deflected. The admiration she thrived on had thinned into suspicion. One Saturday, I passed by my parents' house. The lawn was overgrown, porch light burned out. I knew they could still pay the bills, they just didn't want it with their own money. For years, they had leaned on me so quietly they forgot what it meant to stand on their own. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car across the street, watching the house I had unknowingly kept alive. Part of me wanted to knock, to hear them admit they were wrong. But another part of me, maybe the wiser part, knew it wouldn't come. Some people cling to their version of the story no matter how much proof you lay at their feet. Instead, I drove home and opened my laptop. I started writing, not a rant, not an expose, just a record. A plain account of what I'd done, what I'd discovered, and how it all unfolded. No names, no anger. Just truth. I posted it on a local community forum under a simple title, What It Feels Like to Be Erased. The responses trickled in, then multiplied. People shared their own stories, quiet sacrifices gone unnoticed, family betrayals swept under rugs, years of effort ignored. Reading them, I realized something. My story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror for others. And I asked myself, if being erased connects you to others who've lived the same, is that its own kind of justice? Weeks passed and the forum post kept spreading. Not viral, not flashy, just steady. People from towns I'd never heard of left comments. This is my life too. I thought I was alone. For the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible one. My story wasn't locked inside my chest or buried under my parents' denial. It was out there, breathing, connecting. At work, my boss called me into his office. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, he slid a form across the desk. Full-time position, he said. You've proven yourself 10 times over. Thought it was time you stopped working double just to stay afloat. I signed without hesitation. A steady paycheck, health insurance, the kind of security I'd been denied even while funding someone else's life. That weekend, I drove past my sister's condo. A for sale sign stood in the yard. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Whatever future she'd built on my back was crumbling on its own. Back home, I pulled out the last copy of the bank records. 4 months, they'd been proof of my existence, my contribution, my truth. Now they just looked like paper. I fed them into the shredder one by one. The sound was final but not angry. It was release. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cheap beer, the town lights glowing below. For years, I thought my worth depended on them, my parents, my sister, their approval. But the truth had done something better than earn their acknowledgement. It freed me from needing it. I didn't reconcile with my parents. I didn't try to. Some debts can't be repaid, and some people never learn to admit the cost of what they've taken. And strangely, I was okay with that. Because I had something stronger than their validation. I had myself, unedited, undeniable. So when people ask what happened, I just tell them the simplest version. I stopped paying for silence. I started living for myself. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.